Why? That is a question I have been asked a lot since I got back to civilization. I locked myself into a Mars simulation at Mount Everest. And this question keeps occurring. Why? Why trade away all the comforts of this wonderful life here? And why concern yourself with space at all? Why do a governance study on space? And why do it in this kind of confinement? Well, I think there are many great answers to that question. For example, if you want to fast-track your way to a more sustainable, environmental, circular way of thinking about resources, then maybe you should actually think about these places, this handful of simulations that exists underwater, some of them in the desert, in volcanoes. It is a way to get this gratitude for what we have here on Earth. It is also a way to never think about water or electricity in the same way again. So all of these pretty good answers, I find, to the why question. But none of them are the reason that I decided to go. Instead, the reason is power. I have been obsessed with power my entire life. And I reckon so have probably most of you. Because what power essentially is your capacity to get your will materialized, to influence others, to get what you want. And so as a general rule, it's either someone influencing you to get what they want, or it's you influencing them. In space, however, who has power isn't quite clear yet. We have an agreement. It's from the late 60s. 109 countries ratified 17 surprisingly idealistic articles. It's called the Outer Space Treaty. And it states that you can't really claim territory in space. You can't make it yours. Sure, you can put up a flag, but as it so happens, you know what that flag looks like today? Like this. More like a symbol of global peace than a national assertion of victory. And that's not due to the treaty, that is due to spatial radiation. But essentially, the principles is that everything that is carried out in space, it's supposed to be to the benefit of humanity, to the benefit of all of us. Very idealistic. And, arguably, much easier to write articles like that when the idea of settling in space is more like science fiction than what we have today. What we have today is both public and private companies that are saying it's the imminent 20s. That's when this humanity will get a planet B, or at least a base on the moon. And so we have physicists and engineers who are working tirelessly to deliver on that promise. And, unsurprisingly, we're also seeing things like NATO in the end of 2019 expected to state, space is now a war-fighting domain. We have China claiming or planning to claim a special jurisdiction, a special economic zone, rather, around the moon. And we have the US already passing legislation saying that if you are a US company and you manage to reach a certain resource, yes, then you can commodify it, you can sell it, you can turn it into a sellable product. And some would say that's not only bound to happen, but it's actually a very good thing, because commons, which is most similar to what space is right now, this idea that it belongs to all of us. Commons, that's not a sustainable thing. Commons or public goods, there is even a term called the tragedy of the commons, which states that essentially if you don't have a state or if you don't have a company controlling an asset, its value won't be realized and it just won't work. Which is why it's very interesting that Professor Elinor Ostrom got the Nobel Prize in economics for looking, not theorizing about what works and what doesn't work, no, looking at actual case studies of when managing commons works quite well. And so she did this and she found principles. Principles to make it work. And those are the principles that led me to go into this simulation. That is what I took with me. And I sat down with my crew in Nepal, and we just went through everything. We started with a fundamental, which is what is our shared purpose? What is it that we want society to be? What do we want this architecture of power to deliver on? And so we had endless discussions on this, and even though we were a diverse group, we found something that we believed in. And then we went on to engineer, according to the principles, this architecture of power. Governance is the architecture of power. And so we put graduated sanctions in place, and we were quite proud. And this is our constitution for the new world. Went in, and me as a principal investigator of this participatory study felt kind of good. I felt like this is what governance is always supposed to be, something that makes us feel safer, and also something that helps us, and perhaps even forces us to become our best selves, like live up to who we can be. But as we went in there, we had to start enforcing these rules. And I found not only as a participatory part of this study, but also as a human, that it was incredibly difficult, particularly because we had in our crew the same person who was responsible to decide who got to go into future crews. Now, you try to enforce what you agree upon and align each other under those circumstances. I found that daunting. And so we look at enforcement, because this is not the only simulation that I will have to do to complete this study. It was the first of its kind, but I'll have to go in again in other places and probably encounter different problems every time. But enforcement, that I don't see that I'll be able to escape. And so I look to what we have done on our Earth, on our planet, when it comes to enforcement. And we have a staple thing that we do. We back our rules with violence. And we do it in a very specific way. We have the monopoly of violence. The idea that we task a certain group of people, and we give them the mandate to enforce for all of our benefit, or that's the concept. So the police, the armed forces, they and only they are a part of this enforcement. Essentially, for centuries, if you think about it, behind every law, there is a gun. But here's the really cool thing. It doesn't have to be like that anymore. Something has happened. It's happened probably to each and every one of you. You have experienced automated compliance. You have experienced laws, rules that are not backed by violence, but are backed by code. Now, this might sound really abstract, but it is not. You're living it every day. How many of you have ever been frustrated with an intranet or a digital interface of any kind? How many of you have been frustrated? then you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about developers creating a universe that you live within. And they're not there, the developer isn't there to say, do this or else. There's no need for threats or consequences. Because in a coded environment, which currently is on our devices, but with augmented reality, with Internet of Things, this is not going to be a binary world for much longer. This we know. And so I had to deal with the old school kind of enforcement, but when it comes to the real deal, to actual space settlements that will most likely be quite digital, this is very real and very possible. And just like an image, if you think about all the people who are right now playing massive online role-playing games, they are living this turning how we interact with one another into the same kind of laws that what we're usually just used to when it comes to the laws of physics, which is rules that don't require enforcement. And just imagine when we talk about the need to imprison people or the need to penalize in different ways, I bet that right this moment, there's someone on the far end of the malicious, antisocial, sociopathic spectrum who is sitting down and peacefully following the rules of Tetris. And so this is where you might say, okay, that's really cool as a thought, as a concept, maybe that's what you're thinking, but that's hardly something that concerns you. Okay, sure, when you're online, but not in the jurisdiction that you ended up in due to the nation-state lottery that we call birth. And that's where I would like to go back to that initial question and say, why? Or rather, why not? Why are we using these new muscles, these computational, exponential, emerging technology muscles for everything else, and certainly for the domain that is what happens when governance goes wrong, which is war technologies. We're certainly cross-pollinating our digital capabilities with our least beautiful impulses. Whereas governance, that's somewhere it's the impulse or the thought-through attempt at collaborating in a structured way. It's been 23 years since Deep Blue beat computers on the game that we call the actual chess game. But that's also the metaphor we often use for power struggles. And so I say it's high time we get into the real deal. Because when we look around the world today, at least I don't see that we have, let's say, a climate issue. What we have is a problem governing greenhouse gas emissions. Climate change, that's the consequence of failed governance. I think we must remember something, because it can feel very insurmountable for sure when we're talking about governance design. But we came up with this. Like what we have in place today that feels so natural or so eternal, we came up with that. Voting, Bill of Rights, rule of law, the list goes on, but these are human innovations. And very often, these innovations come when we have some kind of crisis. It's a very bloody history. When you look at governance, innovation, history, bloodier, I would argue, than any other field of innovation. And I think Mars is what can help us remember. We can use this clean slate of a planet as an intuition pump, as a way to jog our imagination, to no longer think or feel, maybe rather, that these institutions that are in place right now, that they are the best we can do. Or as we sometimes say, it's the least horrible option. It's too horrible. We must do better. And I think Mars is a start. So I mentioned automated compliance, and that's just one. It's a very cool idea. I personally think it's something that we could use in revolutionary ways, but it's just one idea. 2018, I wrapped up the world's largest governance innovation competition. And there were 14,000 teams there. 14,000 teams from 180 countries who said, yes, yeah, we have new ideas. We have good new ideas. And so today I run something called the Future of Governance Agency, FOGA. And we look at how to start prototyping different concepts, different ideas. But I encounter, I would say pretty much all the time, people both within and outside of institutions who say, it's overwhelming. What we have in place, it's so complex, it's so much. Where do we begin? And that's where I would say we begin with the idea of Mars. And we put what we have on the table. Not just Ostrom's cases, but the 200,000 years. All the attempts, all the human attempts, and all the human failure at governance. And we put it on the table, and we put our computational capacities on the table as well. And if you are a resourced individual, you can do it in a very systematic way. Just like I was mentioning before, the physicists, the engineers, were looking at how to get to space, but that's really not that ambitious. The ambition, the real legacy, if you will, that's to come up with a way to make life sustainable once we reach another celestial bodies or once we remain here. It is our capacity to zero in on something that I think makes us great. Zero in on something, say this is a gridlock, this is a game theoretical knot, and then we try to solve it. We focus in. Now we have to focus in on governance. And so either you're a resourced individual, you can do this data-driven construction of society in a large-scale way. But if you're not that, if you are a citizen who maybe feels that Mars, governance, reform, all of these things way out of your pay grade, way out of your mandate, way out of your reach, then I would say that we need to go back to my obsession with power. I have been, obsessed my whole life. I've been deciphering it professionally, privately, and really come to conclude, or come to be sure of just one thing. When it comes to what power each and everyone has, there is just one. I would argue there's just one power that we all have. And it's the power to describe the world to yourself and decide what has value to you and what you believe in. And there is not a state, there is not a brand, there is not a currency that isn't contingent on our belief. And so we can start believing in something new. So if you're not that resourced individual who can take inventory of all of the governance histories, the past, the present, the imagined, then just instead get some food on the table and invite your friends. Because at this existential and legal moment, space belongs to you. So have a Mars dinner. Get your friends together, and perhaps even people you don't usually agree with. Because even political parties, that was this idea that was supposed to also just make us better. Arguably, it has divided us in many ways. But right now on Mars, there are no political parties. You can't say, well, I'm going to go with a party line and do this and this and this. No. Get together and then discuss the constitution of the new world. Why not? And as you're doing this, Think about, do you want to draw lines in the red sand? Do you want to put up walls? Who should get to decide, and under which circumstances? And if you feel you're onto something, if you feel that you have an idea for something that might just be more interesting or more fair than what we have right now, let me know about it. Because I have a sense that at this historic moment, either intuitively or scientifically or both, we know we need a new operating system for our new world. Thank you.